Ready?
Yep.
So I'm Eric Hollenbeck, Erichollenbeck.
Okay.
And that's the sum total of what I can spell. So you've just run the
believe
gamut
that.
right there.
And so one of the things is when I ask you a question and you answer the question, you may be waiting for me to respond somehow, but we're going to take me out of this video.
Okay.
So just know that I'm just going to let you make sure that you've come to a complete end before I step in with the next question.
Perfect.
So it's just a little bit weird, you know, like normally you don't have a conversation like that, but that's
I
how
can
it
do
works.
yeah, this ain't my first rodeo.
I figured it wasn't, or barbecue for that
Yeah.
matter.
Okay.
Okay. So, and then also if you can answer in complete sentences, that would be great too. So, how old were you during the 1964 flood?
During the flood, I was 15 years old, and I was working on a dairy at the top of Humboldt Hill. I was actually living and working on the dairy. It was the Sullivan Dairy, owned by Paul Sullivan. And his family, the Sullivan family, I think was from Elk River. They were dairy people. And I worked for Paul. He was trying to dairy it clear up at the top of the hill.
Okay. And what sort of memories do you have about the 1964 flood?
All of my memories about the 1964 flood started in about 12 o'clock at night. And Paul came out to the bunkhouse where Dennis Manfreda and I were, we were 15 years old and staying up there. And he woke us up and said, "Come on with me." And Dennis didn't want to go. Dennis stayed back at the bunkhouse, but I went with Paul, and he took me up to the top of Tompkins Hill, and we could hear Fernbridge. You want to wait till the plane goes?
Wait, Robert, can you hear the plane?
Yeah, we'll wait for it to move on.
Yeah, I can do the whole thing over again.
Somebody when you can hear it in probably doesn't. Okay.
So my memories of the 64 flood start at about midnight. Dennis Manfreda and I were working and living on the dairy. We were staying there. And Paul, the dairy owner, came out and woke us up and said, "Come on with me. I got something to show you." Dennis, he didn't want to go, but I went with Paul, and he took me out to the top of Tompkins Hill, and we listened to Fernbridge. And my God, it was like a war. It was like artillery going off. Boom, 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 boom. Those logs hitting Fernbridge coming down the river. It was incredible. I don't know where he had been and how he knew, but he took me up there, and we sat there for probably an hour listening to the bridge take a beating, and Paul said, "I don't think that bridge is going to stand." Well, it did. It was the only one that stood. Then the next day, we were fine on the dairy because we were clear on top of Humboldt Hill. The next 2 weeks, the thing that I remember the most is that the very, very first C-140s coming in to our area, big cargo military airplanes, in my memory, they landed out at Samoa. I think they landed at Samoa. I think we went to Samoa, and they were bringing in hay. They weren't bringing people food. They were bringing cattle food because the dairy ranchers, they'd been wiped out, and those cows had to eat. And we didn't, you know, we were fine up on the hill, but Paul had a truck, and so we would use the truck, and he'd haul me and Dennis down, and we'd load hay onto the truck, and then we hauled it out to the ranchers on Elk River. We didn't go to Ferndale, but we hauled a lot of hay out to Elk River.
I'll bet that's funny because nobody's talked about Elk River, and I live on Humboldt Hill, and I go hiking on the Headwaters Trail out there all the time. And if it's been raining a lot, there are many, many times I have not been able to get through. So you know that river, Elk River, comes up fast and it just floods.
Oh, it
So I
wiped.
can't imagine in the '64 flood how flooded it was. It must have been terrible.
I think it took the barns, see, and got the hay all wet. So Elk River, when it came up, took the barns and got the hay all wet. And within a very short period of time, if the hay's wet, it's no good anymore. It doesn't turn into silage automatically. It's just junk. And those guys had nothing to feed with.
I think some of the places where they dumped the hay in were stranded cattle. There were just like, they had found some sort of high spot on property and they dropped the hay right from the helicopters right into those spots.
The stranded cattle question takes us to the next memory that I've got is in the spring, early spring, and we went down to Pepperwood. I went down with Paul, and we rented a dairy down there that had been flooded out. About 100 head of cows had gone into the barn to get out of the high water, and the barn collapsed on them with 50 tons of hay in the barn. So, and the amazing thing to me is that the Army Corps never asked nobody. They didn't ask no questions. They just came in with a cat, dug a great big hole and buried it, barn, cows and all, everything. Now, and they had to. You know, I mean, this was all have-to stuff. It's people don't understand have-to stuff. So we rented I'll tell you a quick funny story about that. Chauncey Marion Gould owned the property down there, and we rented the property from him, and Paul and Chauncey are talking. I don't know who Chauncey is. I know he's in a Jeep Wagoneer that's pretty goddamn beat up, you know. He's just an old farm guy, looks to me like. And Chauncey's gonna go back into town, and Paul says, you ride in with Chauncey with him. So I go around to the passenger side door on the Jeep Wagoneer, and it's wired closed. And Chauncey says, oh no, you gotta get in on this side and scoot over, you know. And so I get in on the driver's side and scoot over, and we start up the highway, and every time he'd hit about 60 miles an hour, the front end would start shaking and the whole truck would rattle, and he'd have to back off a little bit, and then he'd hit it again and we'd shake and rattle. And we get to town and we pull up to Humboldt National Bank, and he says to me, come on in, Eric, we're going in the bank. And I says, I can't go in. I got cow shit boots on. I can't go in the bank. He says, yeah, come on in. So we walk in the bank. It is white carpet. Maybe not white, but god dang close to white. And every step I take, I'm going, and I know that they're just, you know, there ain't gonna be a trial. They're just gonna machine gun me right here. I mean, you can't do this in a bank, for God's sakes. So we walk up to the counter, and the people start saying behind the counter, oh, hi, Mr. Gould, sir. How are you, Mr. Gould, sir? Everything okay today, Mr. Gould, sir? And he does whatever he does, and we turn around and walk away, and I'm squishing, walking away. And we get outside, and I said, I left footprints all over that bank. They're gonna be really mad. And he said, oh no, they'll clean it up, it's okay. Eric, don't worry about that. I said, what? Yeah, but they're gonna come and get us. He said, Eric, I own the bank. I said, oh, okay. With this Jeep Wagoneer with the door wired closed on it. So we rented that dairy And one thing I remember is a car, like a Ford Falcon, wedged in between the trees, 15 feet off the ground down there. I don't know how they got that car out of there. I imagine they felled the trees and the car fell out, but it was wedged into the trees. The whole pasture of that dairy had fence posts 2 inches tall. That's all that was sticking up out of the, you know, that much silt had been deposited in one flood. And we planted alfalfa on it, and good Lord, you throw a seed in the ground, you had to jump out of the way if the damn thing didn't hit you in the head on the way up. It was unbelievable. We got 4 cuttings of alfalfa in 1 year, 4 out of Pepperwood that year. Unbelievable ground. Just, you can't even fathom what it was doing. So we got the first cutting done, and bear in mind, we're only 15 years old, Dennis and I, and there was another Eric that came and worked in the spring with us, and he was 15 too. And Paul knew how to get little boys to work, so he had to stay down there. We built a hooch out of bales of alfalfa, and that's what we stayed in. And Paul would bring us cases and cases and cases of little stubby oldies. They were little short Olympia beers about this tall. So the game that we would play is that we'd make a swath with the baler, and and then no, with the trailer. After we were baled, we'd make a swath with the trailer, and one guy be on the ground, one guy on the trailer, and one guy was driving. And when we got done with the swath, we each got to chug-a-lug one of these little oldies, and then we'd trade around, and then we'd make another swath and chug-a-lug a little oldie. Well, by the end of the day, we were blitzed. And Paul came down, it's about 3:30 in the afternoon, something like that, and he said, Eric, and I'm only 15, he says, take the big tractors here, take that trailer, and the trailer's loaded. It was an enormous trailer, 8 feet wide and 20 feet long, and loaded as high as we could load it with bales of alfalfa, take it into town up to Humboldt Hill. So, number one, I got no driver's license. Number two, I'm drunk as a skunk. And number three, this is we had the biggest tractor in Northern California at the time. It's little compared to today, but it was big then. So I got up to Rio Del, and then you had to cut through Rio Del and take Blue Slide, because that was the only way in. It was a Blue Slide road, and they had Blue Slide sections that slid out, and they had it one-way traffic. Lots and lots and lots of those sections where they had stoplights, and then they would say, okay, you stop and you go, and then the lights would change and you stop and you go, and it was one-way traffic all the way along there, probably 8 or 10 of those sections. And I had no sooner got on Blue Slide than a highway patrolman come up behind me. And I thought, the game's up, this is it. And he pulled around in front of me, waved his hand out the window, turned his red light on, and he escorted me through the entire Blue Slide. I never stopped once, red lights or no. He had his lights flashing, and I went through the entire Blue Slide road and got that load all the way home to top of Humboldt Hill. That was, it was a whole different time, because you just had to do what you had to do to get things done.
You and I were talking about how you discover what the story is as you go along, and we've discovered a couple of things in the making of this film. One is we've kind of come to this conclusion that one of the reasons why Humboldt County and Del Norte County seemed to in some ways do better than how people might do in a large city is because of people who are used to working with their hands and who also are used to problem solving. And what do you think about that when you look at something like Katrina and what happened in the wake of Katrina and what happened in the wake of a destructive flood like the '64 flood in this area? What do you think about that?
Boy, you know, I think that with the question of being able to take care of oneself that we had at that time versus what would happen today, boy, you hit the nail on the head. You couldn't have hit the nail on the head any harder. That was exactly what it was. Everybody with a cat in this county, whether it would run or not, if it would just barely run, they were out scraping roads and trying to get things open back up again and people so that they could move, so stuff could move. I mean, there was no way in or out. You could not get out of this county by land other than walking. That was it. And
I'm gonna keep waiting for this plane to go over. Hurry up. Okay.
so then that begs the question, could we do it again? That's the real story. Could we do it again? You know, I think we still got that spirit. I think that that's genetically who we are. At least the people that I know still are problem solvers. The logging, the fishermen, the truckers, every day they're solving some problem that's coming up. And I think that those guys and gals could step up to the plate again, but they're damn fewer than they were before. And that's something to wonder about. We've gone an awful long way down the technological limb, and we got to begin to look at maybe backing up just a little bit. That limb's getting a little weak out there, it looks to me like. So I think that that's the big question. Could we do it again? Vivian and I were sent to Dayton, Ohio one time years ago for a living history conference. And at that conference, if you've ever been to these conferences, they've got lag times, like a 2-hour block that nothing's going on, and they're weird like that, but they do it. And so the people there took Vivian and I around to show us stuff, you know. It's pretty neat of them. And one of the things that they showed us were the remains of 3 steel mills, one right after the other, boom, 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 on the Allegheny River. And I want to say that those were Carnegie mills, but I'm not really sure about that part of it. But and they're just remains now. They're just you know, broken down old buildings that are barely standing, and some of them aren't hardly even standing. Those 3 mills in World War II put out more iron and more steel than the Allies and the Axis combined. Those 3 mills put out more steel than the entire rest of the world. And it dawned on me, we didn't win World War II. We outproduced World War II. We just made more stuff than they could make bullets to shoot at it. And it was that was the attitude. That was the, you know, the get her done attitude that we had. And we're getting a little wussy, and we might want to look at that.
One of the other things that has come up as, when we've been talking to people is really how people work together too. About, some of the women that I've talked to, when people were displaced from their homes, they had 50 people staying with them in these small little homes and feeding them all and, taking care of them until they could get to where they needed to go to get to family or some other sort of home. And it just seemed like people didn't even think about it. They just helped each other.
Yeah, or everybody had to help everybody else. That was the whole, that's okay. Everybody had to help everybody else. That was the only way we were going to make it. That's why Paul sent Dennis and I down in the truck to go haul hay for people that we didn't even know. Heck, we didn't know those people. I think they were our competitors, for God's sakes. I don't know who they were. Yeah, everybody jumped in. I remember working with guys that were working for PG&E at the time and working 14-hour days trying to get power to places and getting stuck out there. And all they had to do was go to a house and say, I'm from PG&E and I can't get home tonight. And they were put up instantly. They had a place to stay, they were fed, they were treated like royalty, and the next morning they went and did it all over again. Everybody helped everybody,
Do you guys have any questions that you think I should ask?
I guess, Eric, if there's anything else you wanted to follow up on that you already said about the technology and how we're kind of moving into a place where we're losing skills, and anything you want to sum up on that topic, that'd be great. What do you think about that?
We've gotten to a place where an awful lot is done for us now. And we don't even think about it. We couldn't. It's the systems in place are too complicated. Vivian and I just went to Hawaii. Now, how many hundreds and thousands of people got us there? That's a complicated system. And hell, our baggage even got there. So those things are great. It's like a new car. All the bells and whistles are wonderful when they work. But boy, when they don't work, they really don't work. And then the car don't work. And that's something that we have to take a look at. What's the fail-safes? And I think that knowing how things are done and how to do for yourself is probably the best fail-safe that we can ask for right now.
We look at our little chips we pull out of our camera, we take all this video and it's on this little square thing like this, and we're like, I have no idea how that happens.
Yeah. Or where it is, or how to get it back off. Or
It's going to happen in 100 years. Can we still get it off
Yeah,
this thing?
we've talked about that, because what we'd like to do is we're going to archive the video that we do, because we're going to get, maybe we get 20 minutes or a half hour of somebody talking, and we won't be able to use all that in the film, but to be able to give it to the library so that they can use it, and then they're going to have to figure out how do you keep this in a format that's going to be used in the future, because down the road, like how we've gone from floppy disks to hard disks to all these different formats, tape and all these different things. And now we're on these little teeny cards, but this is like maybe 5 years worth of technology here, and we'll be on to something else.
You got it pegged, and then how do you retrieve it? Then how do you retrieve it? And yeah, I've thought a lot about that, because we started with TRS-80s here. Well, we've got 3 years worth of Blue Ox that is unretrievable. There's no way to get it off of those floppy disks anymore. It's just kind of out there in Netherland, and I don't know how to do it. The TRS-80s are all burned up and they're not around, and who the hell knows how to read a TRS-80 disc anymore?
Well, my recommendation would be is to go online and find out. Because that's the thing about the internet, is you can find anybody doing anything on the internet, you know, and there are people who do data retrieval from some of these old formats. We've been working with this film on, Robert has gotten a telecine projector or it's not really called a telecine projector, it's a telecine box, so that you can take 8mm and 16mm and play it and then record it with the high definition video camera, so you can upgrade it,
Oh
or
yeah.
at least retrieve its original
Yes.
video quality
Yeah.
in this new format.
Yeah.
But luckily, you know, there's such a thing like that we can use to do that. But there's, I think, you know, I'm sure somebody somewhere has a floppy disk to hard drive system set up.
I couldn't agree more. And I think that the internet is a wonderful thing. I don't think that the technology is a bad thing by any stretch of the imagination. I think that we just have to know what got us here, so we know the steps to back up when we do need to back up down one of these limbs. That's all. All that I'm saying is understand how we got to where we're at. How do you actually multiply without a calculator? How do you write cursive? It's just understanding the technology that got us here. Then we know the steps to back up to, and that's my only axe that I'm grinding, is know what got us here. You know, you can't have a Tiananmen Square anymore. You can't have a My Lai massacre anymore, because everybody's got cell phones, and that goes globally within a matter of seconds. So governments are afraid now, and more power to governments being afraid. They ought to be afraid. They're afraid of the repercussions and the fallout from the general public, and that's a good thing. So the internet in that aspect is a terrific thing. You know, it has reined in people that are need to be reined in, and but putting all of your trust and faith in it forever, you know, boy, I haven't seen much yet that lasts forever. Forever is a hell of a long time. So
And one of the things we've done is interview Mike Downey with the Sheriff's Department and talk to him and Dan Larkin, who's the coordinator for Office of Emergency Services. And they were saying one of the things that they see as being different this time around, should we have another event of that magnitude, is being able to use the technology. But they were also very clear in saying that they do have the maps and the hard documents as well to fall back on, because it's a danger. If you think this is our plan, we're going to use technology, and all power's out and the cell towers are out and the internet's out, then what do you do?
but if you use the technology, what's the technology do? Who opens the roads up? I haven't seen a computer yet that can go plow 250,000 tons of dirt out of the way. I haven't seen a computer yet that can build a quick log bridge over a creek so that you can get by it. That didn't take technology. That took hands-on doing and getting out and getting the job done. That's what that took. Falling the damn trees so that you could span the creek bed, so that you could throw some timbers over it and get some kind of truck to hobble over it so that you could get people either out of there or food into them. And technology ain't going to help there. I think that the technology is a wonderful thing for rebuilding, but at the crisis, it's pretty much breasts on a boar hog. It ain't got a whole lot of use.
My husband has a lot of those sayings. You notice I didn't even flip.
Yeah, and you notice I didn't say tits on a boar hog.
That's exactly what my husband says. I was going to say he says it a little differently, but that's okay.
It ain't my first rodeo, but I got the point across.
So, Robert, do you have any questions?
Yes.
So if you could just keep looking at me when you answer the question, that would be
Sure.
great.
Did you run across any Scrooges? All for me?
Say again?
Scrooges, all for me and none for you. And if so, how were they treated? Please say no.
I didn't, but I was only 15. I didn't see anybody trying to capitalize on that flood. Maybe there was, but I sure didn't see it. I mean, even Chauncey Gould, for God's sakes, was trying to get people going again, and I've heard that Chauncey Gould was tighter than bark on a tree, but he gave us the dairy down there to just get alfalfa going. I don't think he charged Paul. Paul didn't have no money. Hell, he couldn't have charged him very much. No, I don't know of any instances where somebody tried to capitalize on that.
Yeah, we haven't heard of any either. We, in fact, we interviewed one of the women whose family owned Big Loaf Bakery, and they said they were baking bread and dropping it into places, and nobody was being charged for it. It was all gratis. So
Yeah.
it's like those are the stories that we've heard.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I remember from the time.
Any other
Well, Eric,
questions?
is there anything you'd like to just add about your Blue Ox Mill and how you're sort of embodying that whole technology versus part one information sort of ethic?
I think that it's important to have these little islands all around the world, I guess, but at least all around the country that keep old technologies alive, that are an ark or a storage bank for old technologies, just so that people can understand what were the events that led up to the technologies that we're using today. Because nothing poofed out of the air magically. It was all one step at a time getting us to the technical advancements that we have right now. And I think these are little safety valves. And Blue Ox here is one of those safety valves. That's the way I've always seen it. A little bank account that maybe is important.
I think so. No maybes about it. Right. Okay. Well, that was great. We just had one other question, but not for the. But we can do 30 seconds of silence. Yeah, we have to do 30 seconds of silence to capture the ambient sound of the place. So you'll tell us when that's up, and then I'll.
Okay, I'll count this off. Start now. Hey. Great.
That was my totem. It is.
Your
Yeah.
raven.
Yeah, in logging lore, they're the souls of departed loggers. And that's why they don't have a nice voice, because they're going through the woods screaming about how much better they could be doing your job than you are. And you're supposed to just look up and go, yeah, I know.
I had never heard that before. That was interesting.
Pretty soon it's going to be my turn to, yeah, you dumb shit. That's the dumbest way I ever seen that done.
Never seen it done that way.
So the only other you and I had talked about a little bit on the car on the way over is we had talked about maybe coming out and filming your barbershop quartet at some point, if that would be okay with you.
Sure.
Okay. Do you have like regular times that you practice? Because it would probably be best for us to do it during practice so we wouldn't interrupt a performance.
Yeah, Thursday nights, and I'll let me get your number and I'll
Okay.
put that together.
Okay.
So you had a couple questions. Did you want
Sure.
that list? And then we can just kind of meander slowly.
Yeah, yeah.
So how did you decide to come up with a plan to create the Blue Ox School?
As you know, there was no plan for any of this. It just happened, and I didn't know until recently why it happened. When I first started, I started with a $300 bank loan. That was our total financing to build Blue Ox, and so if we wanted anything, we either had to make it or find old junk that nobody else wanted. And I did not intend to build a museum. That was not our intent at all. It was just finding the old junk nobody wanted. And then my whole life I've always done for myself. And that now I see as a PTSD thing, but then I didn't understand it and I just thought it was me. So when we decided to print a catalog when we decided to make a catalog in the Millworks, my first idea wasn't to go to a print shop. It was how do we print a catalog? So then we found the printing press and a little bit of type, and we started to set up the print shop to print a catalog. Of course, then the internet came along right about then. The catalogs went obsolete overnight. When I set up the ceramic shop, I was going to make tiles, reproduction tiles for the Victorian housing industry. We set up the blacksmith shop to keep all this junk running. And then I would have other harebrained ideas, and we'd set those up, and just because I'd get bored, and that's another PTSD symptom. And so then we had all these shops that we were using 1% of the time. And a tour came through here of homeschoolers, and one of the homeschoolers was a teacher for the court-ordered community school system. And he's the one that approached me and said, have you ever thought of opening this up to students? So we figured, okay, we'll try and see what happens. And that was 15 years ago, and that's work, because then they get to use the shops all the time. And then when we need them, we boot them out, do whatever we need to do, and then they come back and do it, their stuff. So it works great, but it was never a plan. There was no plan. The plan was to make dinner money that night. That was what the plan was. That's been the plan forever.
It seems like people probably give you a lot of things that they just don't know what to do with anymore. It's like tools and equipment and things like that. Do you ever get to the feeling like, oh my gosh, please find somewhere else?
In the beginning, I had to find everything. And I did all kinds of different ways to find equipment. One of the ways that I did was look through old quad maps and find out in the woods, find where old mill sites were, and then go look at the mill sites and see what was abandoned there. Another way was the insurance maps. I'll think of the name of them in a minute, and they go back to the late 1800s, and those guys were brutal. They were absolutely brutal. They told everything that was on the property, down to a pile of scrap iron, because it was all being insured. Sanborn maps, that's what it's called. But then eventually, over time, it's been 41 years now, people started to understand what we were doing, and then they started bringing the stuff to me, and now I don't go look for it anymore. And occasionally I do get stuff that I just have no use for at all. And at 67, I'm pretty cutthroat anymore, and I have no problem at all passing it right on to the scrapyard. But most everything, you know, especially stuff with historic significance, we find a place for, because that's important to me. What we were as a county and as a people is important to me. You know, we were problem solvers, and I mean, we had a massive foundry right down the street, Acme Foundry, and they kept the sawmills going. Sawmill break a gear the size of a small locomotive, and they just made a mold and cast it right on up, send it back out to the sawmill, and away they'd go again. Yeah, those guys and gals at the time were very, very ingenious and self-sufficient. We had to be. We were up here behind the redwood curtain. We had to be.
Your decision to start working with the veterans, how did that come about?
The decision to work with the veterans was a twofold decision. First, I had to come to grips with my own issues. I was in some of the heaviest combat in Vietnam at 19 years old, and I was in the front line, and I was a radioman, which I always thought was okay. I just went to a reunion of my platoon. There's 9 of us left. Out of 28, 13 of us made it, and there's 9 of us left out of the 13. We're sitting around talking and having a beer, and all of a sudden at this table over here, I heard somebody say, RTO first to go. And I stopped the conversation, and I jumped up and I said, "What? Wait a minute, what was that? What did you guys just say?" And everybody got dead quiet. And I said, "No, come on, really, what did you just say?" And finally, Tim, the ammo bearer for the machine gunner, he said, RTO first to go, Eric. I said, where the hell did that come from? Because that's what I was, an RTO. And they said, oh yeah, we all knew it. I said, well, nobody ever said that to me. And they said, well, hell no, we wouldn't tell you, but that's why we wouldn't hang with you, because then the sergeant told me I had a life expectancy in a firefight of 14 seconds. 14-second life expectancy. That's the average for an RTO. And we were in firefights all the time. So first I had to come to grips with all of that, and through the VA and the Veterans Center uptown, I've been working on my own issues and my own self, and learning myself now in a different perspective. See, that's why I built myself an island here, an island I don't have to get off of, because I'm safe here. I feel safe here, and I feel that I can make anything that I need to make. And then after I felt pretty good about where I was, it dawned on me that I'm not the only veteran that has issues coming back. You see, in this country, we are the finest in the world at training a civilian to be a warrior. We're the best in the world. And we are the worst in the world at training a warrior to be a civilian.
You know, I'm sorry, but we're getting some wind issues, and what you said was really important, and I'm just sorry that we kind of missed that. Maybe we can get somewhere just a little bit more protected.
Start at the idea started vet school?
No, actually, just that last thing that you said about the best in the world.
Okay. Are we quiet now?
That's
It
it.
seems like it, but just we don't have.
We
the
can go.
gusts
We
going
can go
through.
in that room.
How's it sound?
Now it sounds okay. I was just waiting that we had that little
Okay.
gust, and I was thinking that might have done
Let's
it.
go ahead and try it again.
Okay.
So we are, in this country, we are the best in the world at training a civilian to be a warrior. We're the best. Nobody's better. And we are the worst in the world at training a warrior to be a civilian. The Native Americans, they had it pegged. They knew that it took 2 years to train a villager to be a warrior. But they also knew it took 2 years to train a warrior to be a civilian. And when the warrior came back to the village, he was not allowed in the village. He was met outside the village by an old warrior. And for 2 years, they would work around the perimeter of the village. And finally, they would work their way back into the village. And then he would be integrated back into the village life again. And then the next warrior coming back, it was his turn to go train him back into the civilian life. So, because you see, a warrior has to make a whole different self-image of themselves. Who am I? When you first come back, I'm a warrior. That's what I am. Hell, I was 101st Airborne. I was as warrior as you can get. And then over time, and probably the biggest healing that I had was opening for tours, because all of a sudden, the tourists coming through were mirroring an image back at me that I'd never seen before. And that image was that I was smart and I knew how to do something that they didn't know how to do. That was a huge, huge healing for me. So that's what the same exact thing with the young men that we're working with right now, taking them back when this hearse is done, taking them back to Springfield to be honored as a craftsman who built this thing. You understand? They're honored as the craftsmen who built this thing, not the warriors who built this carriage, but the craftsmen who built this carriage. And that little subtle twist is the whole twist that they have to have. That's the whole thing in a nutshell. That's the key. And and that's what so many people can't understand. And how could they unless they went through it? You know, you can't. So that's why I think now at this age in my life, it's important for me to take the experience that I had and be able to give back to these boys, because ain't nobody went through any worse than me. So no matter how bad it was, I get it.
And what you're saying too is reminding me of what I hear a lot from men who retire. Their identities are so caught up with who they were in their work life, and finding a way to replace that with who they are now is really difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Especially, I think, for men. I don't see as many women have that identity as, so tied up in who they were in their work world.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I think that the identity of our work is huge. It's everything for, especially like you said, for the man. And once you retire, now who are you? Now what are you? That's why life insurance companies got it so easy, because the average lifespan, look it up, for the average lifespan for the American male after retirement is 1.5 years. And then we're dead, because we can't get our heads around who we are. So just check out. I'm done. I must be over.
Yeah, my husband was a police officer, and so he has a lot of friends who are police officers, and those guys can't retire. And when they do, it's like you said, if they retire, they're dead within 1 year, 1.5 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think it's a similar sort of thing when you're in that sort of place where you identify so strongly with the character that you were in your work world.
I think it would be good to have Eric set up the Hearst, having that contract to work on that project.
Yeah. Yeah. How did that come about? Because I know some of the filmmakers who are working on that film for the Call to the Redwoods. So how did that ever come about?
Can I be honest?
Sure.
And you'll edit it and make me okay?
You can trust us.
The Hearst Project, first, to understand the Hearst Project, you got to back up an entire year. I went out to CR because we were asked by the Veterans Administration, a guy at the VA, to start a school for veterans. And we started, over a course of a year, we looked into that, and it's god dang near impossible. They have it right up against an impossibility. So the easiest way to do it, and about the only way, is go through an existing school that's already accredited for VA. So first I asked Gary Eagles, because we already have the high school program, but they don't do whatever it's called, older kids, older people. So he said, go to CR. So I set up a meeting with CR. And they called back and said, okay, the meeting is April 1st, 9 o'clock. I said, perfect. April Fool's Day. We'll go in, I'll drop the bombshell. The whole thing will hit the fan, and Viv and I can walk out of there. We'll have a wonderful rest of the day. Everything's going to be fine. This is perfect. So we go in there, and it was the head of CR, Smith, I think her name is, the lady head, and Crystal Moore, I think, and she's head of Veterans Affairs at CR, Vivian and I, and we're at this table. So I told her, I told them finally it was time for me to drop the bomb, and I said, look, when I was in Vietnam, they told us for every one of us in the jungle, it took 15 in the rear to keep one of us out in the jungle. I'm told today that number's 26. For every one on the front line, it takes 26 in the rear to keep that one on the front line. For those 26, you're the best thing since sliced bread. CR is the best thing going. You couldn't be any better. It's that one you can't touch. And I know because I tried it. I tried to come and collect my GI Bill, and I lasted 2 days. And on the second day, I thought, get me out of here. The chasm's too great. There's no way. I had seen and done things that those young people couldn't even comprehend. And how could they? You know, the chasm is too great. So I said, I want to start a school for that one. That you can't get in here anyway. And I thought, this is it. This is the end of the meeting. And Crystal, the Veterans Affairs lady, jumped up and she started pounding on the table saying, he's right. He's right. He couldn't be any righter. That is exactly the snag we're hitting. We can't get them here. They can't come. So, well, it turns out later, Crystal is a frontline veteran. She gets it. So, yeah, they're going to do something. This is a grand idea. They're going to do something. A year goes by. Nada. Zero. Zip. Zilch. No movement at all. And then I got an email because of our reputation. You know, we have a national reputation. And I got this email, and this guy said, look, I'm commissioned to build this hearse. I'm in over my head. Looks like you could do the architectural details for it. Would you consider it? Only you got to do it for free. Well, I looked at the project and I thought, my God, this might be sexy enough to get CR to move off their duff. And it was. Boy, in a matter of a week and a half, they saw the publicity can be generated from this, and they had veterans down here that quick. So it was that project, and the reason I took it on, number one, it blew my hair back, but number two was that I saw it as something sexy enough to get this veteran school going. And and it worked.
And what's the schedule like for the students, and how often are they here, and what sorts of things do they do on this project?
So we started with 3 boys, 3 students. They're not boys anymore, they're in their mid and late 20s, but we started with 3 of them, and 2 of them were down here, supposedly. 2 of them were down here Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, 9 to 3, and then one of them stayed Thursday, and the other boy came down Thursday and Friday, 9 to 3. Well, what in reality happened is that they were here from 8:30 to 5:30 every night. The one boy who Anthony, who has to work at CR in that same office with Crystal, he wasn't here the full time, but any hour that he could be here, he was here. So they were here. I mean, I had to, tell them at 5:30, you're cutting into beer drinking time now. We have a problem now. Yeah, let's move along. They started out working on a woodworking project with me, making doors and for a job in Chicago, and we did that for 1 week because this whole thing hit really fast, and it hit faster than I was ready for, and I had to get that order out. And then we started making we did the drawings. This is a pretty cool story if you want to hear it. There's only that one known photograph in the whole world of the hearse, and Smithsonian's working on it with us, and they digitized the photo for us and made it as crisp as they could, and it's a little bit better, and we knew the size of the rear wheels. That's the only reason we could build a hearse at all, was that one line item in the original bill of lading that still exists says the rear wheels are oversized. They're 56 inches instead of the standard 50, $2.50. And because we have to get all of that done, and we're only a quarter of the way through right now, and we have to get all of that done before the carriage is built so that we can then shift over to the windows and the rear doors, because I don't know exactly what size to make them yet, because he may not follow the shop drawings.
What do the veterans say about the program? What sorts of comments do you hear from them?
We had a film crew down here, and they asked that question, to the veterans, what do you think about the program? One of them said, I'm working on something that my children can go see, and maybe even my grandchildren. It'll be there forever in the Lincoln Museum. Yeah, they totally got the significance of this thing. I mean, it's huge, and whatever you call it, it's not called a celebration, I guess, but whatever that thing's called in Springfield next year is enormous. I mean, it's going to be nationwide. It'll probably go worldwide when they start filming it, but it's enormous. 6,000 reenactors showing up. That's just one thing I know. Yeah.
So what are some of the most challenging things about keeping this going down here, keeping everything moving?
Being a job shop is very difficult. That's why there are none of us left anymore. There's 8 of us in the whole United States, architectural job shops. And the reason is twofold. Number one, you have no idea of what your cash flow is going to be, ever. And secondly, every job you bid, you've never done before. So you're throwing numbers out at it, hoping you win, and And I've never gone back on a job and said I need more money. I've never done that. I know guys that have, but I haven't. Because I always figured I bid the job. It's my problem. I got to get the job done. And Viviana has, you know, done a incredible job keeping the doors open with this completely irregular cash flow that a job shop has. It's a constant challenge. So now we're trying to set up our nonprofit and keep the millwork out for profit, but spin the schools, the tourism, and the radio station into their own nonprofit, so that the millwork doesn't have to keep supporting that, and the millwork can just support itself. Because I've supported everything for all this time, 41 years now, and I'm getting tired.
So speaking of getting tired, are there some young people that you can see maybe mentoring into this role of what you've been doing down here? Or did they break the mold, Eric?
No, you know, as far as this moving into the future, I'm very optimistic for the craftsmen of the United States. I really am. I think we've gone about as far down the buy junk from other countries road as this country wants to go. I think this country wants quality again, and that's one thing. And secondly, God bless OPEC. I just heard that industry is now saying we have to bring industry back to the United States again, not because they're benevolent, but because the shipping costs are outweighing the cheap labor in other parts of the world. We got to bring it back and pay good labor and and keep it here without shipping it. The shipping's too expensive. So I think that the day of the American craftsman is on the verge of happening again.
And so do you have some people that you're kind of mentoring into a role that might someday, you know, do something similar to what you're doing, or, you know, step into one of your teaching roles down here? Or have you done that? Have some of your high school students moved into teaching roles?
Some of the high school students have become teachers here after they graduate from high school. Dell, the blacksmith shop teacher for 4 years now, came to school here for 4 years, and the lathe room, we had two young men that taught lathe turning. Both of them child prodigies. They have now moved on, but but we have done that in the past. The idea to keep it going in the future is there isn't anybody as nuts as I am. It's got to be different. So that's why the whole Craftsman's Village, and then have people that are passionate about one specific thing in that shop, and another craftsman in the leatherworking shop, and a printer in the print shop, and open those shops up to the craftsmen that are passionate about it and about educating the public as it comes through. And that way you don't have to have one guy doing it all. And that's the idea, and that's my hope. Because I'd like to see it go on past me. And that's the only way I can see it happening.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I because it is your life. I mean, it's like some people have a job and then this is your life, and that's a different sort of thing.
Right.
Yeah. What would you say is the most rewarding part of working with the students?
I think that the most rewarding part of working with the students is watching them step so far out of their comfort zone and succeed. You know, they may not succeed 100%, but they get 80% of it. They get 90%. Beginner's luck is a marvelous thing. It's a grand thing, because without that one success, climbing the mountain of failure would be damn near impossible. But you've always got that one beginner's luck that you know, I did it once, it has to happen again, and then you get good at what you're doing. So yeah, I learned way early on that my job with the students was to be the cheerleader, and ooh and ah over everything they do. My stock line is, oh my God, you're a born natural at this, no matter what it is, and no matter what it looks like, because they have to get success. That's what parents do. They ooh and ah over what our children do, and and that's what craftsmen do that are secure in their own ability. Then they can ooh and ah over what other people do, and that happens in all fields.
Right. Yeah. I think about kind of like the self-fulfilling prophecy by you saying you're natural born, you know, pro at doing this, like right from the start, and you start from that level. You don't, you know, you're not all worried about like everything you do is you're just going to blow it. And maybe people have been telling you that all your life, that, you know, what you're doing is wrong, what you're, you know, that you don't know how to do this. And here you just have one person. I mean, it's amazing what one person, what a difference it can make in somebody's life.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. And, you know, the first time when the boys and I came out to do the casting, you saw me ram up the sand mold today, and you saw how fast I did that. Well, that first sand mold I rammed up took all morning long. And I mean, I got it down. I really watched everything, and we poured it, and it came out good. And then I said to him, okay, now you watch me do that. You do it, clean up in here, and now you pour the next one. You saw me. Ain't no big deal. I'm going to go smoke my pipe. And I left. And I went in the office, and I got Viviana, and I said, would you come out with me for a minute? So she came out, and I gathered the boys around, and I said, look, you guys think I'd done that before, don't you? And their jaws hit the ground. I said, hell no, I never did that before. But I wasn't about to tell you, because you jinxed me. So the point is, you charge. You know, you don't ask, can I take that machine gun nest? You don't think about it. You don't do nothing. You stand up and charge and get the job done. Now start pouring iron. And that's what they've been doing. And we went through a 2.5-week siege where nothing worked. Everything we poured, we had to remelt back down again. But now we're on a roll, and it's working fine. So it's that military mentality that surrender ain't an option. That is not an option. That's not even a word in the vocabulary. You just keep charging ahead and get it done.
I liked what you said too about stepping outside of your comfort zone. I took a class at Call to the Redwoods down at the Shipley Farm. And so, you know, I had just retired from HSU, and so was thinking I would go down there and watch and listen while they showed me things. And the first thing we did was we injected goats with their, you know, vaccination or whatever it was. And it was like, the only thing I'd ever done was hold my cat still at the vet. And I was like, every time I went to class, I was totally outside my comfort zone. And it was just like a kind of a miserable but exciting experience every time, because, you know, you just like, oh, I like to be really good at what I do, and I'm not good at any of this. I've never done this before, but to really keep pushing yourself is a really interesting experience.
And isn't that what the '64 flood did to us? Exactly. We had to give our own vaccinations. We had to get our own water. We had to make our own power somehow. We had to heat our own homes. And we rose to that occasion. When you step out, and you're forced to step out, then the cream rises to the top, and you can do it. Yeah, somehow, and that flood did the exact same thing. It jumped us out of the comfort zone and forced us to become one with what we were doing, with how we were living again.
I think there's something too to this expectation that we will do it. I think that that really happened here, that people didn't go, gee, can we do this? I don't know if we can do this. People just said, we will do this. And people did it, and you saw your neighbor doing it, and so you knew that this was a normal thing to step up and do this, you know, to act that way.
I asked my sergeant once, I was a radioman for the sergeant, so I was with him 24 hours a day. I was his shadow in the jungle. I was never more than 10 feet away from him at any given moment in time. And one time he talked to me, in my whole tour, one night, and that was for about 10 minutes. And I asked him, how come we're all 18, 19, and 20? And he said, it's because, Eric, when I yell, charge that machine gun nest, a 19-year-old's going to jump up and charge. A 22-year-old's going to stop and think a second, and a 25-year-old's going to say, right after you, Sarge, I'm right behind you the whole way. It forced us to be 19-year-olds again. You can't ask. You just jump up and do it, or you ain't never going to get the job done. And that's the same thing. I go back to that same story with the pouring. You know, we were trained to jump up and charge, by God. And if that one didn't do it, do it again. Keep attacking that same mountain until you finally get it. And that's what we, as human beings, the warrior part of us can do. And that's why these vets coming back, you see, some of the stuff they have to get rid of. Some of the stuff's garbage and just throw it out. But some of it ain't. Some of it is life skills that are going to serve you well throughout the rest of your life. And that's one of them. That idea that you just charge on ahead and get the job done. Because that's what brought us through 64. Yeah, nobody asked, can we do this? Because who the hell's going to do it for you? How's it going to get done if you don't do it? There ain't no other option. Can we stop for just a minute and go over and take a look? I'm going to let you guys pick it up. Too heavy. Okay.
You're kidding, it is kind of
Yeah. Okay, let's slide it that way. And I'll just tip it right in. Perfecto.
it's a little toasty.
Yeah, bear in mind it's going to be hot. The sand's going to be hot too. So you can clink on it and break some of the sand off. And I'm going to get you tongs right here. Good.
That is.
Put the scissors the right way. Beautiful.
Yay!
Beautiful. Look at that pretty face. Oh, that's great. Good job.
Cool.
Great job, you guys. Now we'll just let that cool. Now you can say you've done it. See?
Are you kidding? This is what I'm going to say I did in Eureka. Well, we poured some, you know.
Yeah. Poured aluminum. Why, didn't you?
In our spare time.
It's like, what did you do on your summer vacation?
Right. We'll leave out the lots of eating and sitting on the couch, and we'll talk about the molten aluminum thing.
Right.
That's what I did.
So that was pretty fun, huh?
Oh, yeah.
Great job.
It's still pretty toasty.
I can see the steam.
The first burns I ever got was actually from metallized cinder fuel after quenching.
What's that?
We're talking about whether we got burnt. And if this, the first burns I ever got was from metal I assumed was cold after quenching.
Oh.
Oh.
Oh. Now it's cool. Oh, that's beautiful, you guys.
That's a good shot.
See, we got our, this is where we were short on the pour.
Gotcha.
I didn't see that one.
When
I
the
took it-
sand fell.
hmm When I pulled it out, I pulled it out just a little bit cocked, see, and then I knocked the corner of that one button off.
Gotcha.
But those buttons are really, really difficult because they're inset.
Yeah.
Oh,
So you
yeah.
can see that, yeah, it's a undercut,
Yeah.
and when you try to pull the mold out, you're breaking that undercut.
Yep.
These are extremely, extremely elaborate molds.
Where do they go on the Hearst Mansion?
These go, the columns come up on the side, they're all the way around. The columns come up and then a disc, then ET sits on top of the disc, and ET has a little hat that's made out of leaves, and then a urn comes out of that with a bigger leaf hat on it, and then a pineapple on that, and then the ostrich feathers out of the pineapple.
Wow. Not very ornate at all.
Should just take you an afternoon or so
Wow.
then,
So
yeah.
you gotta take pictures of that with your phone.
Oh, yeah.
And this right here is where we weren't
That
quite
little
at
part
that,
kinda
at that
slipped.
line, remember?
Yeah. That little part that kind of slid
Yeah.
off.
Yeah. But we can take a die grinder and just grind that off.
Yeah.
So that's no big deal.
Yeah, I'll take pictures.
Good job, you guys.